Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Hi, welcome to the story behind my stories, Leith Hill, episode 4. So last week we left it that we talked a lot about why I set a book on Leith Hill. I keep calling it Leith Hill now, and also why I set it in the middle of a bike race. Now the story behind my stories is obviously, as I said, I did ride London, and to add that extra difficulty, but also a lot of the time to get Goodwin and his team to be the team investigating, I've got to position it that way. Whenever you watch things on TV or these series shows, there's always a connection to the team or something like that. So it's the cleaner's grandma or something like that. And for me to write authentically and as the police would, I want to try and bring that into the books. So in order to do that for Leith Hill, I needed one of the team to be on site because they wouldn't have necessarily been the first people called, and people wouldn't have even necessarily known about the dead body if there hadn't been a cycle race on. So the perfect thing there was to make one of the team be doing Ride London. And so then thinking back on their characters from Connecting Trains, it couldn't be Goodwin. He does cycle, but I can't keep having Goodwin be the person in the middle of it, and he usually is on the international ones. So for Leith Hill, it had to be a different member of the team. And so I went through them. Didn't think it could be Penny. The perfect one was Angela, because she was athletic and a go-getter, and that was her personality in Connecting Trains. But in Connecting Trains, she wasn't very good in that. She was a bit of a lone wolf. But that was actually a good personality trait for her to be somebody who would be doing Ride London. And as I mentioned last week, all of my characters, except one in this book, which I will tell you about later, and all the murderers and things, I have a bit of me in. And obviously there is a bit of me in Angela Phillips, in that I have the same focus and determination that she does, maybe just not in all the same things. She is way more athletic than me, that's for sure. So I chose Angela Phillips, and she's grown since Connecting Trains. And I just thought that she would make the best one and not be wanting the team all there supporting her, where some of the others would have been, come on, support me, be out there, help me out, sort of thing. So I'm going to read you where she gets introduced in this book, which literally is a page and a half in from the start. Angela Phillips, a detective constable with D.I. Goodwin's MIT team in the Surrey Police, was one of 2,000 regular or non-cyclists who were doing the endurance ride following the 2012 Olympic cycle road race route, ending on the Mall at Buckingham Palace. Her start time meant as the man had emerged covered in blood, she was just approaching the climb at Leith Hill. Living on the road race route, she trained a good section of the course multiple times. It was a 50-mile loop from her house, through to Ripley, the climb up Newlands Corner, Dorking and Box Hill, then through Leatherhead towards Cobham, leaving the course there and heading back home. 2 weeks ago, she'd ridden to Richmond Park, then started the actual route from there, through the Surrey Hills, looping back home. That brought her a good 90 miles, excluding only the very centre of London. She was confident, as she'd added in the Leith Hill loop several times, to ensure she could make this climb. Leith Hill was the toughest of the hills on the course, though Angela preferred it to Newlands Corner. Box Hill, once through Dorking, wasn't an issue either, as it was a steady gradient, just a long drag. She'd beaten Newlands Corner. Leith Hill now loomed above her. So you can see there, if you listen to last week's episode, that was me. That was my training for this event at the time. Angela, being a local, having the support of the rest of the MIT team and Goodwin's as well, she'd mapped the route where she would stop to refuel, take on the necessary energy to keep going. She was avoiding the official water stations. Her plan, at Leith Hill, was to complete the climb, continue past the car park, which was the feeding station at the top, dropping down on the long descent, and stop there just before rejoining the A25. Skipping that stop, she'd avoid getting tangled up with others making the descent. So that was my plan too. So I planned to stop here in Byfleet to see Lauren, and she made me my special sandwich on the day, which you will laugh at this. It is a gluten-free currant bun thing, and then it had peanut butter, Marmite, and apricot jam. That's what I used to fuel because I really struggled with the gels, and so I wanted to save them till later in the ride. And at the time that I was hitting Byfleet, it would have been just an hour and a half in. So I still had a lot to go. Let me see. I actually completed it in 7 hours 38. So I had enough time to eat real food and fuel my body with real food before I had to start using the gels towards the end. And so I planned to stop at the roundabout in Byfleet so Lauren could give me that real food and I didn't have to take it with me. And refuel with water. And then I see all my friends and family that came out to support me. And then I would make it all the way through to that drop after Leith Hill. I knew I would need to refuel then because it's a tough climb. Already done Newlands, and you're another 30 miles in. Probably not far off halfway, and just heading towards Box Hill. So I plan to do the same. Ignore the water station, because if you want to queue for toilets and things like that, they're all busy. There's loads of people there. But I use that in the book too. The climb had been fine so far. Having done it in training didn't make the climb any easier. especially not with 40 miles under your belt and in your legs. She started off a lot earlier than most women. Her predicted time, based on speed, meant she'd managed to get in the first wave, leaving the Olympic Park well before 7. I did that, but I don't know why, because I put my predicted time as 8 hours, I think, as did Claire Tyndall. And I can't remember what Claire Wrigley put, but my start time was a good hour, 2 hours before either of theirs. It was good because I was with a lot of fast men. They went off first, and so I had clear roads to myself for a bit. And I met a lovely lady in Richmond Park, and we started cycling together. And we were together then until about 4 miles from the end, when she said, "Just go, Helen. You've got more in you. You go." But yeah, she could see up ahead the sharp kick around the right-hand bend. It was the hardest bit on already burning legs. Angela wanted to get past the man in front of her. He was cycling erratically, cutting across her, in and out of her line. She knew she'd require full concentration to focus, block out the fire in her legs, to get round this last little bit. As she drew closer, nigh on at the top of Leith Hill, round the bend, he wobbled considerably, steering with only one hand, cutting right across and almost ditching her. Dropping her foot after unclipping her shoes, she avoided the collision. Conscious of those behind her and creating the same issue, she looked over her shoulder. There was a good enough gap between her and the next cyclist for her to straighten up and push off. So, you can see in that bit, I vividly remember. So I remember that happening to me near the top of Leith Hill, and I was determined that I was not going to walk any of it. And so I had to start again from a standstill, having clipped out my foot. And I don't know who that person was. They weren't having a heart attack like this guy, but I added that in for a reason to make Angela stop where the bloodied man had come out of the Leith Hill surroundings. So, but I do have a little story to tell you from once I'd done that and I'd got through Box Hill and Leatherhead, and I was heading up towards Epsom. I've just gone through Cobham, which was, home territory for me. And we were heading up the long stretch towards Epsom. And this was the first one. I don't know if you remember when Boris Johnson announced Ride London and that regular people could do it. He said he would do it himself. And so I didn't see him, but at the start I saw John Turreau, who does MasterChef. He was there at the start and had a time slightly ahead of mine. I never saw him. Never saw him on the race. But Boris Johnson wasn't there then. But he came cycling up next to me as we were going to Epsom, cycled past and cut in, and literally this much, a centimetre, missed my front wheel, and I almost ditched then. And he just cycled off. So yeah, that was my two claims to fame on my Ride London. So I use that. So this is again where not only am I using the fact that there's a race set there, I could get that from just being a spectator, being on the course from the actual Olympics that we watched in the first place. But I use the things that happened in that. You will know that if you listen to these and if you've read the books, you'll know that in Hello or Goodbye, with the cruising, I went on 3 or 4 different cruises and did do the one to Hawaii, but used experiences from other ones in the book. But these were my experiences. So getting cut up by Boris Johnson. It wasn't him on Leith Hill, but something happened uh, with another cyclist at the top of Leith Hill for me, which made me have to stop and then start again on the worst part of the hill. So I put both of them at Leith Hill and to combine them together so that hopefully you get the feeling of that's happening, but also to bring in my experience for that. She keeps going, and then just past the car park, this guy collapses as she's trying to help him, and they both end up on the floor. This was my way of getting her to stop at the top of Leith Hill. Because otherwise it feels like it was just, she walks into the car park and this man covered in blood walks out of the undergrowth. Just not real, not authentic. So I wanted for her to have a plan to do something else, which she would have, because like I say, her focus and determination in achieving what it is she wants to achieve is the same as mine. So that's why she would not want to be held up in the car park like all of the other cyclists, and would choose to do whatever she needs to do wherever. My plan was to stop at the Box Hill one because it wasn't the top of Box Hill where you could stop and there's the cafe and there would be the car park and spectators. The stop at Box Hill was way round the corner and further on past the lookout points and stuff. So I was hoping more people would stop at the top of Box Hill, not knowing. And then I was going to, I did. She didn't get there, but I did stop at that feed station just for a wee. So while she's laying there on the floor with this guy and both their bikes on top of her, she briefly thought to herself, "This is going to screw up my ride and time for completing the 100 miles." When the man's eyes closed and the full weight of him and his bike crashed down on her. Cursing herself for not cycling on past the man into her descent, leaving him to be somebody else's problem, she quickly dropped those thoughts, moving into action. Angela extricated herself from her bike, her leg cut and bleeding from being trapped beneath it, with his weight on top of it. She wiggled her toes in her cycle shoes, and whilst it hurt her calf, sliced and bleeding, thanked the cycling gods that nothing was broken. She managed to climb up onto her feet, freeing her bike from underneath the man, who was laying very awkwardly, and pushed it to one side. This was from, I think, the first time I ever went out with cleats, and I was just local to home. It was literally half a kilometre from home, and I pulled up at a set of traffic lights at a railway bridge, and I stopped, and I just literally, I was vertical, and I was just smack there on the tarmac, because I'd totally forgotten that my feet were clipped in and I couldn't, just take them off the pedal. And luckily, obviously, the lights were red, but I was at the front, and I was like, "Oh my god, they're all going to cycle over the top, drive over the top of me." So that was the first time when I fell off a bike, and I too thought, because it's quite a height, um, oh my god, thank you for me not being hurt. I was bruised ego, but I wasn't hurt, nothing broken. So then it goes on to her trying to help him, trying to elicit help from other cyclists just cycling on past, which sadly is probably a trait of cyclists. I do think that they can be incredibly focused, and I use that in the book. She has slightly different motivations. If she wasn't a police officer and in sort of that caring profession, she wouldn't necessarily have stopped to help or even been interested. She would have been focused and gone. She'd worked in the corporate world or something. But cyclists are quite insular, I think. They might ride in packs, but at the end of the day, it's them, their performance, their bike, their climb, their every revolution. So I won't go into that because we do that. And then a little bit further along, two guys have stopped to help her, and she's now there's left one looking after the guy, giving him CPR, and she's heading back to that feed station that she'd passed in order to call for help and see what they've got in the first aid area there. They started to walk slowly back towards the water stop, both of them making the same sound. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of the metal in their cleats on the cycling shoes, making contact with the tarmac each step. They were walking as fast as they could in cleats. The accompanying man from the pair said to her, "It's all happening up here now, isn't it?" Angela turned to him, confusion flicking across her face. He continued, "There was a man that just came out of the woods, all covered in blood." Angela stopped, placing her hand in front of the man to stop him too. "What?" "Yeah, some man, apparently, came stumbling out of the bushes, brandishing a knife, blood all over himself. He puked in the bushes, screamed, 'Elsie!' and collapsed. So I reckon if there is any medical help, it'll be on him at the moment. Come on, we've got to hurry." Whether he liked it or not, the cyclist was now her sidekick until she could get reinforcements. She had a body out on the road, they still had a chance of saving, and God knows what in here. This blood-soaked man sounded more interesting, but before she called anybody to help, she was the officer on scene. It was in that moment she resigned herself to not finishing the race she'd trained months for. She'd been on target for a personal best. Leith Hill behind her, the worst over. Box Hill was just an easy grind, then a matter of churning out the miles to the finish on the mile. She'd been so sure she could beat her previous times, but now she knew there was no way to catch up. And there was too much here she needed to deal with. This is what she did. What she wanted to know was what the man covered in blood was all about. So that's where Angela's ambition in her job counteracts her disappointment at, in her eyes, failing to achieve her personal best on Ride London. But instead of it being really devastating for her, it's tempered with the fact that she's the officer on scene, and from connecting trains, you know, Angela Phillips always wants to be the one that gets her man. I will catch you next week with the next episode. and we'll move on a little bit more with Angela. See you next week. Bye.